Hey everybody, and welcome to Business Automation 101 interviews. Today I am with Bob Levin, who is a member of the group and somebody who's been a great support to me ever since I met up with him. And he's smart, he's funny, he's great to listen to. Bob has been involved as a full-time computer technologist, and he's been doing training since the late 80s. He's one of the best trainers that I know, and I love listening to his training. So it's great that we've been able to get him into Business Automation 101. So what I'm going to do is ask Bob to introduce himself, and as people come in and ask questions, we'll answer them, or we'll just keep talking because we have a great time whenever we get together. Hey Bob, tell everybody about yourself.
Hello everybody. My name, as was stated before, is Bob Levin. And I am in the computer business. Been in it forever. Just a quick background. I started working in mainframes way back in the day. This was probably in the early 70s because I'm really old, right? But my portrait is doing pretty good in the background. So I worked on mainframes, worked for IBM, Control Data Corporation, a couple of others, worked on a whole bunch of different computer equipment. Moved from there into their tech support organization, supporting that equipment, moved into training, did training, computers got smaller, so forth. One day was walking down the hall and the director of our division came over and said, "Oh, hey, Bob, come here." And he points to the room over there. He says, "In that room is a box." He says, "You're going to be supporting that, and we're going to be using that to manage our network product that we were selling at that time," because I've been with networking forever. And I walked in the room and said, "Well, what is it?" They said, "They call it an IBM PC." So it was running DOS, one of the early versions from Microsoft. And I've been in the Microsoft world ever since. I played a little bit in the Apple world back in the day when, we were one building and Microsoft was one building and Apple was one building, and grew from there. So I've been playing with this stuff for a long time. So I moved into training departments and I started training our customers on how to use the equipment and got into Linux, or at that time it was Unix. And wow. I was really dangerous with that. Kept playing with that stuff. Moved around in the training departments, back to tech support, back out into the field, doing regional support, back in. And then finally I said, I've had it with this business. I don't want to be in computers. And I bought a vending machine company. And I started filling soda machines. And I did that for a few years. And then I sold that off because, one, it was killing my knees. So I went back into and became a consultant. And one of my first customers was a credit union. And after I consulted with them for a while, they hired me. The deal was good. So I went to work for them and maintained all their tellers and all their equipment and their server and so forth. And my other little exciting thing was we were the first credit union in California to go with a web-based, because the internet was new, this magical thing out there on the internet. And we put our first online banking system up on for them. And we were the first one in California, first credit union anyway in California. And I don't think the banks really had anything yet at that time, but we put it up. And then most of the other credit unions were coming over to us to get onto the internet as well. But, we didn't have, you're still dealing with dial-up lines, and we were dealing with slow lines, and something fast was called 56K. So it just continued with that. I stayed there for about 5 years and then left there and went back into just general consulting, small business, mainly small business, very small businesses, and maintaining and setting up their networks, getting them on the internet, keeping their equipment running, making recommendations, evaluating software, and so forth. And been doing that ever since. And I guess the last piece of that was all these customers wanted to get on the internet, and they wanted to have something called a website. Excuse me. And that was somewhat problematic because building websites back then was basically building it with HTML in code. And I kind of knew how to do that enough, but I kept having to give business to other people that were offering web hosting. So I found a web hosting company and bought it. And that way I could host it on my servers. And that was back in 2002. I still own the company and I still offer web hosting. I am very particular. It's one of my quirks. I'm very particular in who I take on as a customer. I don't want to just take on anybody because these are high-end servers, highly maintained. They've got, speed and uptime and so forth, right? And we're hosted in one of the largest colos in the world. And that's where we have it in a rack with my machines, and I'm constantly doing upgrades and tweaks on those. So, do that and offer some basic email services, but basically web hosting and so forth. I keep that clientele relatively small, and I still do consulting on the low end. Don't have very many customers anymore. A lot of them either went away. I had some law firms that, the one in particular, which I will not name, I sort of like got put out of business by some government agencies for something they were doing. And so I've lost a few customers like that, but I still have a fair number of customers that just rely upon me to make sure their networks are working and making sure that all their software is the appropriate software they need to use. So, and then I do other stuff, online training. I've got my Bob's Lessons webinar I do every 2 weeks. I've got my membership site, which got a bunch of stuff in it and other things such as that. So that's kind of me. I am what you would call self-employed and just do what I do. Right. And the good part is that occasionally I can go out and see a movie at 11 o'clock in the morning as my lunch break and then come back and go back to work. That's me.
Thank you so much, Bob, for introducing. And hi, Rona. Nice to see you join in.
Let's see. I'm going to see if I can get on here.
What are you trying to get onto?
To the Facebook. I didn't have it open, so I can't see any questions.
You should be able to see the comments down on the right-hand side. There should be a box that says comments, and then you can see what people are saying.
Well, mine happened to be in, one comment. It's on the left-hand side on my screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. How can it possibly? I can't see it in the right-hand side. It's not there. It's not there. Oh, it's on the left. Got it. All right. There we go.
I think that's one of the biggest things that we have when we're training people is that people won't look anywhere other than where you tell them. You know, if you're doing some training and for whatever reason you've got, as you said, it's on the right-hand side. No, it's not there. Then they, rather than looking around or trying to find an answer, they then go to support or something and say, it's not on the right-hand side. You know, you've given me the wrong information, rather than going, is it possible that I'm looking at a transposed picture, or did somebody just not know their left from their right? Have you noticed that yourself when you're doing training?
Oh, I've noticed it a lot in training as well as in support. Because I've been answering support questions for years and I've been training for a long time. And if you say it's on the right-hand side, it better be on the right-hand side. All right. If you say it might be on the right-hand side, but you might want to look on the left-hand side, then that gives them a little better look. But yeah, they want to follow the instructions specifically given to them when you're training. And it's like, you got to do, if you do this, this, and this, it had better work. There's no like, well, if you do this, this might happen. But they don't want to hear that. They want to know it's just, as we say here, because I know that you have viewers all over the world and you're in Australia, but it's not the Staples easy button all the time. Right? There's commercials we had on TV here a few years ago, which was the Staples office supply store. And you just go in and punch the easy button, great big, huge button, probably about that big around that said easy on it. And you just punch it. And whatever you wanted it got magically taken care of in the store in the commercial. So everything isn't always the Staples easy button. And sometimes you've got to do a little investigation yourself. And hi, Rana. I saw I finally saw the comment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things. I was talking to somebody yesterday about finding a coach or consultant, somebody to train them. And they thought that they needed to just have somebody who was a couple of years in front of them, simply so that they could, that they were not that far in front of them. And I challenged the person about that. I said, no, what you need is a good trainer, somebody who actually can go back to the basics rather than expecting that you know all the terminology and the words, that actually stop for a moment to explain what a FABAPI, a Facebook API is, rather than just presuming that you know what that means and any software or any training that you do has it. And I think, as I said, Bob is one of the best trainers. I love watching his videos. He does Bob's lessons, as he said, every couple of weeks, and they're in on a Friday for him, Thursday for him. They're Friday for me, he goes right back to exactly that. It's here, it's on the left-hand side, now go to the right-hand side, now it's up the top, now it's down the bottom, because jumping around because you know what the result is, or you know the software so well yourself, is one of the dangers that trainers fall into, where they just presume that if I say, go and create a Google Doc, and people go, and where do I start with that? And you have to say, okay, go and type in drive.google.com, then click here, click there. And if you're not doing that, then people end up getting confused and your training is a fail. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. The philosophy nowadays is a little different than it was, even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And a lot of it is because of the attention span that we have learned to handle because of these cell phones, okay? And Twitter, right? I could go on for hours on this particular one, and some people that are listening would just groan and say, not again. But like for support tickets, people think they can ask their support question in 144 characters. And it's never the case. It says, like, I use the example, I'm off on a little bit of a tangent here, but it's like my car, I go out to start my car and I can't get it started. And that's what they report. Now, it's like, wonder what that could be. So then you have to come back and ask questions, and most of the time, the questions are ones that they don't really want to hear, right? Well, don't ask me a question, just fix my car. Well, you go out and you ask, like, okay, what does it do when you try to start it, right? And not realizing that you have to say, okay, first, do you have the keys for your car in your hand? Yes. Have you gone out to the car? Is the car still in the driveway? And the guy says, no, the car's not here in the driveway. Well, that's why you can't start it. It might have been stolen. All right. So you have to go through all the basic steps. There's an old story about the guy calls into support and he's talking to the tech on the phone. And it's like, well, my computer won't come on. I can't do it. And nothing happens whatsoever. Right. So they talk for about 15, 20 minutes. Finally gets around to, well, is that little light on the monitor turned on? And he says, no, there are no lights on the monitor. Okay, well, press the on button. What happens? Nothing. Couple more, a few more minutes there. It found out that the monitor became unplugged from the wall. All right, so is it plugged in? It's an old adage of, is it plugged in and, even working at all? So it's like, in this case, I can't start my car because it's not in the driveway. Well, you didn't tell me that it wasn't in the driveway. We could have saved a half hour and I would have told you to call the police, or did some other family member take it, or it could be that I can't use my car because I got a flat tire, but I'm trying to figure out why the ignition system's not working. So it's like providing enough information on that. I also have a weird philosophy which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't for training, is that I believe that you need to start with some of the building blocks. You've got to have an understanding of the underlying technology to be able to figure out how to build a website. I mean, well, let's build a website. Here we go. So first off, you're going to type in left bracket HTML, right bracket, and then a bunch of other stuff that I can't remember off the top of my head because I don't have to have it memorized, because I can just go copy it and paste it in there. But you need to understand a little bit of the basics of that. But you need to know what a server is and what the internet is and how do people do that. So I get a lot of times called out because I provide too much information. And it's very hard, and it's a fine line to walk. And it's like your example. Well, the first thing we're going to do to produce these particular PLR products and so forth is we're going to build a corresponding spreadsheet. So open up Google Sheets. Well, the assumption is that they know what Google Sheets are, for one, right? Two, they know how to open it. Three, do they even have a Google account? Right? Oh, can you do this? But I don't want to use Google Sheets. Can I use Excel? Oh, yeah, you can use Excel. Oh, I know Excel. So it's throwing those things out. And I always like to try to build the foundation first and work up from there. But a lot of times you can't do that quickly. And that's one of the flaws that I have run into, is having to be able to do these things so damn quickly. You get 5 minutes to train them on how to do this or that. And it's hard. It's hard.
So do you break it down? Do you consider breaking it down into smaller chunks? I'm doing an IFTTT course, as I might have mentioned in the group a few times. And what I did was I actually went into the group and I was explaining the basics of IFTTT, which was what are services and what are that. And I've included that into the group. They're just a Facebook, well, I don't say just, it's a Facebook Live. So the quality is a Facebook Live quality. I've got my ums and ahs and I can't find this and everything else like that. But I'm not going to redo it because it is the basics of it, where the more polished type training is going to exist is how to do it. But have you found that breaking it down into smaller chunks works better for people, or it works worse for people if you're a trainer?
From a trainer's point of view, it's easier if you can kind of do it as a fairly good sized block, right? And break those blocks down. From the student side of it, usually they want it in small, short pieces. All right. Hopefully they understand and they can tie them all together. So I've been doing a little bit of both. You have, yeah, okay, fine. You've been on my webinars. Okay. I did not know that I could spend so much time talking about some mundane little quirk about the internet. And some of these webinars that I've been on have been run very long. I have tried since the beginning to keep it to an hour, and I haven't been able to do that yet. Just one subject of like, how does email work? I mean, it just works, right? So I spent 2 hours talking about email. Name servers. How do name servers work? Right? Now, do you need to know how name servers are designed and how the whole big picture is? Well, yes, but that's like 5 minutes. But you need to know why we have name servers there, what their uses are, and what happens if you screw up your name server entry and why your website all of a sudden doesn't work. So there are a lot of those things. Now, we've also, not that I'm promoting a whole bunch of things from my webinar, but most of the time we have a subject, we do that subject, maybe one question or something, and then we go into like, well, thank you for showing up for the webinar, close it down, and we go into what I call the after hours. And that's where it's kind of open session where they can ask any question that they want about technology. I don't take political questions. I don't take religious questions, and I don't talk about money. All right. So they can throw those questions, and if I know something about it, because I have a wide range of knowledge because of how old I am. Okay, Rana, you're ready for throw another shot in there saying I'm not old again. All right. And I've had lots of experiences with the internet because of all the things that I've had to do. Networking since the beginning of when networking was created. Mainframes back in the day where we were, the first units I worked on were very discrete components where you had one little board, maybe the size of a 3x5 card. Okay, so if nobody knows what a 3x5 card is, it's a little note card and it's 3 inches by 5 inches. And I can't convert that to centimeters. I am sorry. Right? So they were about like that. And you had to figure out which card was the one that was failing because of a transistor or a resistor that was bad on it. Now, we didn't replace those. We just pulled the card out and put that in. But as things got smaller and smaller and smaller, right, you had to learn more about how the system worked and then how to operate it and so forth. So going through that stuff, I have the ability to pull and answer a lot of questions a lot of times on how things are going on. Just a little side story. This past week or the week before it was, we got a question that my hard drive, I got a 1 terabyte hard drive and it's almost full. Well, we talked about it for over an hour about all the possible things that could be related to what the problem was. And I believe we narrowed it down to something that you wouldn't think about. OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, name it, P drive. She had a 1 terabyte drive. She kept trying to delete files and so forth. What the nice lady didn't understand was that, I think it was Lois, she really, really sweet and knowledgeable, didn't understand that it's synced between Dropbox and your computer. So if you put a file at Dropbox, it puts it on your computer. So you have 2 of them. So every time, and people were uploading stuff in this Dropbox and filling it up and so forth, it was probably filling it up. And then we talked about some ways to alleviate that. I mean, you can turn off syncing or get an external drive and point that sync to an external drive, right? Because she had that 1 terabyte drive and she had 20 gigabytes of space left, which on a 1 terabyte drive is not much. And back when I started, I mean, if you were talking about a gigabyte of data and storage, it was like, oh, wow, is that exciting, right? Because I used to work on 10 megabyte spinning disk drives that were platters that were the size of a washing machine. Actually, we called those washing machines. And then they were the pizza oven ones because they would come out of this great big container. And they were 10 megabytes. And we thought those were huge.
I worked at a school and I was given a very expensive zip drive, the little zippy drives. And, I was told to guard it with my life. And, I was very lucky that I'd been given it. And recently I was tidying up and I found this gigabyte. And this is from when my son was at school. So this is 18 years ago or whatever. It was 10 megabytes. But at the time, I was signing my life away. I had to guard it with my life and, make sure that there was no damage to it because to replace it was going to be, a couple of $100. And in schools, that's a lot of money. And, it was the top of the range.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I got in the back, my back room. I've got a couple of stacks of old computer internal, even the newer ones. I actually have a few of the old IDE cables, but I have some of the SATA drives. I've got, 80 gigabytes, 160 gigabytes. I've got a pile of 320 gigabytes, which were taken out of servers because we used to run the servers with 320 gigabyte drives. We put in 8 of them, RAID them together to get the space. And I mean, oh wow! I mean, now you go buy, you go to the local electronics store, whatever you want to call it, Costco, Best Buy, whatever. You can go buy a 4 terabyte drive,
Yeah.
right? And that's a spinner, and they're getting the SSDs up there as well. You can get a reasonably priced 500 gigabyte SSD, and I run a few spinning drives still for backup, but mainly I've gone completely SSDs. They're great.
And it just shows one of the things I was talking about in one of my Facebook Lives not that long ago was about the need to be aware that spending a lot of time on a training course doesn't really make sense now, because you can spend 5 weeks or 6 weeks doing a training course, and at the end of it, it's all totally changed. So you have to start all over again. One of the things I do with most of my training is that you get a result almost immediately, because it doesn't matter that you can then keep on watching the rest of the course, but in the old days you used to have to, the training was set up that, yes, it would take 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever to complete. And at the end of it, you would do an assignment or finish or be able to display that you'd learnt your knowledge. I think it's totally flipped around now, in that you want a result from the first set of training or the first couple of days of training, so that you can put it into practice and then you refine it afterwards. Agree, disagree? What do you think?
Pretty much agree with that. Not 100%, but pretty much agree with what you're saying.
There are exceptions. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions.
No, but I agree. I'm not disagreeing with you completely. It depends upon the subject matter that you're teaching and to the level that you're teaching. I've been building a training course for Camtasia, and when I first started out, I ended up having to trash it and throw it away because the trainings were too long, and talking about it. But again, it's what was the subject. So I had to redesign how I was presenting it, and I will probably end up redesigning it again over time for how to use, and then fill in the blank. All right, how do you do this here? Fill in the blank. And working out with some of the basics and keeping all of the modules relatively short. There's been this debate. We've had it in my Bob's Lessons group. We've talked about it. I've talked about it with other people and so forth, and trying to keep what is the optimal length of a module. And part of it is because the attention span, they don't want to spend any more than about, 8 minutes on a module. Well, I've only got one module that was under 8 minutes. All the rest of them are 10 to 12 minutes, up to 20, depending upon the subject matter. And then how you break that down.
Exactly. But Camtasia and those sort of trainings, they have to be 12 minutes because, also, and as I said, I've watched a lot of your training, because it takes you 12 minutes to explain how to do the thing that you're trying to do. So it's not a case, in this case, it's an operational need that you need to spend 12 minutes. If the 12 minutes is spent talking about the weather and, this will make you a superstar, and, you'll make $1,000 in 5 minutes if you do this one thing or whatever like that. They're the ones that have to be short. But exactly what I was saying, the operational need of this is that if I watch that 12-minute video, and nowadays with all the ways that you can speed up videos, you can cut it down. We were talking about some PLR training that happened in another group that we're a part of, where both Bob and my membership sites sit. And, I watch the replay of that at 1.5 or even 2 times speed. And then I stop it when I get to a point where I want to actually implement what I'm being taught. So I listen, action, listen, action, action, so that rather than I wait till the end of the video and then start doing things. That explains how to do XYZ. That makes sense. Let me stop the video. I'll go and try it. That didn't get the same result. Do I need to watch the next video? Do I need to replay that bit of video, or do I just have to wait till the next section where they'll explain, and you also have to do A, B, C? And that's how I learn. I don't know how other people learn, but when it's something that I actually am able to implement the results as I'm watching, I'm happy to watch a 20-minute or even a 30-minute video. It's when it's blah, 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 funny, huggy, warm and fuzzy sort of stuff. It's like, okay, I want a result. I'm operationally minded. I'm a business person. I don't have time for the warm and fuzzies when that's not a video that I'm watching for. When I want to have the warm and fuzzies as such, I go to the mindset management or the personal improvements. But when I'm trying to learn how to do software or learn how to implement something, I prefer it to be, okay, let's start this. This is, I'm going to show you how I'm doing it, or this is why I'm telling you about why servers work the way that they do, so that when you go and do your DNS or you go and do your name servers, you get it right in the first place. Then I'm willing to listen.
Oh, I agree. No, I absolutely agree. It depends upon the subject matter. And if you're dwelling into a very technical thing, and I'll use I can use Camtasia, or I could pick up any other product that might be out there. And it depends upon what level you're trying to teach. Now, I can take and show you how to use Camtasia in 10 minutes. You probably will spend the next 5 weeks trying to figure out what to do with it once you got it, because there are so many different things related to inside of Camtasia. In this example, just clicking and starting it, and then you've got this screen, and it's like, holy moly. Remember the days when you opened up Microsoft Word or Excel the first time, and you looked at it and you went like, holy, what do I do with this? What is a spreadsheet? There are 10,000 formulas that you can do. Now, do you got to know them all? No, but maybe you should know where you can find them in there to do something. You have to have a mathematical background. So we could take it to the extreme to say, to use Excel, you need to first get a master's degree in advanced mathematics. And that would be, all the stuff, the algebra, the calculus, all that other stuff, before you can even use that. Well, no, because most people just want to use it to add a couple of numbers together, which is basically what I do with it. Put a bunch of numbers in and then add up the column. Hey, there we go. I don't have to do it longhand, even though I can still do it longhand, because I was learned that technique in elementary school. But that was way back. We were still going to school and we're sitting on wooden benches, and we only had classes during the day because when the sun went down, that we couldn't burn fires inside the schoolhouse. Okay, so maybe that's an over exaggeration. Not that old, and I grew up in the city, not in the country. So, right, we had coal fire furnaces in our school. And actually that's true. Right. The school that I went to, they had a powerhouse, and the heat and the electricity for that high school that I went to, it was built in the 20s, and it had this powerhouse out there. And every week a couple of trucks would come out, and they dump in and fill up the coal bin. And they had a fireman who actually stoked this thing, and it ran generators that gave us power for the school, and and gave us the heat in the wintertime. And this was still going on in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, that they were still doing this at that high school, right? And we were, middle of the city, there was the grass was the football field.
Yeah.
That was it. So it depends upon what you need to teach and what the optimum outcome is. All right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I find that interesting with people where they go looking for they spend more time on every module should be 8 minutes rather than let's do a module and see how long it takes. They're trying to game the system, I suppose, in that I want to make sure that I keep my people interested, rather than making sure that they keep people interested by the quality of the content. So when I'm watching your videos and I'm actually learning, I'm not looking at it, is it a 30-minute video before I start? I'm looking at it that I know that I'm going to get a result from it. And it's the same as, SEO when it was around, and it's still around, but, when everybody was trying to game the system. It's now that e-learning is becoming so valuable and so important. Everybody's trying to game the system there as well, in terms of all my modules are under 8 minutes, so you can learn how to do this perfectly. And you watch their videos and it's just starting to get to the answer. Go to the next video. Okay, so I go to the next video and you watch it again and you still don't get your answer, because you've got to go to the next video, because they haven't done the chunks that you want for the result that you want. If you want to set up an IFTTT thing, if it's going to take me 12 minutes to explain it, you don't want me to cut it off at 8 minutes and then go, and in the next video, I'll tell you how to do steps 5 and 6. You want me to tell you steps 1 to 6 in the one video.
Because if you have to go back and review steps 2 and 3, now I got to go back to the other video and watch that and then jump to the other video. So I like to keep them in sections by design or functionality of how it needs to go together. So what with, look, I triple the if then the, I can never say that. It's one of those things. It's just too complicated for my brain to throttle that whole thing out. But yeah, you may have a 3-minute section. You may have, and if you got a 3-minute section, you might as well take 2 of them and put them together. All right. But if it's going to take you 15 minutes to go through the whole thing, put the whole thing there for 15 minutes. All right. With my webinars and the fact that they end up being so long when they're one subject, I've now had to spend the extra time on my part, after the webinar's over with, and to actually watch the webinar and time mark everything. So yes. It's like Danny came on at the beginning and he was done at 45 minutes. And then we talked about this and that was 12 minutes and then so forth. So people can jump to those areas. Hard part about that is trying to keep the subject matter focused on that one item. So you could be in the middle of something and then a question comes up that then takes you off in this flying over here and then you got to come back. So that's something I've had to learn, is to keep it focused on that particular thing. But I have to put that in because I don't want to be breaking them up and editing them out of context and then have multiple videos for 1 week or for 1, 2, or in this case, a 3 or 3.5 hour, because no one's going to watch for the 3.5 hours. But if they know what's in it, they can go to that particular time frame and do it from there. So that's something that I've had to learn to adjust to. But
that's what your audience expects, that when they go in, that there'll be the one video and that there'll be the timestamps and they can go to the bits that they want. And I think that's something that often gets forgotten when people are doing training, in that they don't think about what their audience wants. It's more I've been told that all modules must be 8 minutes and I must be told that it must have a transcription and it must and it must and it must. And if your transcriptions are not being read or if your videos are not being watched, then you need to be aware of that. So how do you gauge engagement, I suppose, with the training that you do?
Let's see. How would I gauge that? I think it has to do with the feedback and the follow-up afterwards, right? Because I have a philosophy that when I'm doing that training, now, if it's a live training where there are actually people on, I'm doing a webinar or we're doing this here, and I asked the audience, I just explained how to do this. Does everybody understand that? And I better get back all yeses. If I get back one no, I've got to know, what don't you understand? because when I was doing classroom training, we would have anywhere from 8 to 30 people in the room, depending upon the subject. We were mandated on what we were supposed to teach, right? Because it was for the company product and so forth. So you need to do this, this, this. And we didn't have the luxury of video cameras and so forth. We had a whiteboard and equipment that sat off to the side. So when you were trying to explain something about this here, you had to make sure that they all understood it. If we go way back to the Unix days, to run this particular machine that was a Sun? Yeah, it was the Sun Micro mini computer. You had to know the 50 or 60 basic Unix commands. I mean, how to change directory, how to move, how to remove, how to delete, how to copy, how to edit. So you had to go through and do all that stuff. And if you missed one little piece of it, then there's a problem, right? Because then you've got to take that person aside separately and get them up to speed. Now, when you're doing this on a video, right, a recorded that somebody's going to be watching, you've got to make sure that what you're presenting is going to work for the majority. And it's not going to work for everybody, because you can't do it for everybody, but for the majority of them. So you need people that are going to be able to review it. Like my sister, who doesn't know anything about technology, right? She knows how to use a computer, and that's about it. I mean, that's what she does. She's a law clerk, right? So she doesn't need to know all the other stuff, but have her look at it, and then somebody who is more technical. Okay. So I give it to you, right? And I got 72 hours of videos that I'd like to have you review. Can you get it done by tomorrow? All right. Yeah, no problem. I'm not in any rush. Right. And have someone with a higher level of expertise in technology to be able to look at it and use it and say, does this get the point across? And trying to get both of those things done is sometimes difficult, because do you teach to the lowest level of student knowledge or to the top level? Well, you don't do to either. You got to be someplace in between. So
and then extra videos that explain some of the basics and some of the complex. And I that's how I try to do it. I keep to the middle, as you said, because I tell the story of when I was at a school and we were being sent for some Excel training. It was, in Australia, they have what's called a pupil-free day, which means that on the first day back to term, you don't get to send your kids to school. Your teachers have to go to work, but they don't have any students to deal with. So during that time, they go out and do training. And we were going to do some Excel training, and rather than dividing it by, do you consider yourself a basic, intermediate, or an advanced trainer, they just said, you can go to the school that you pick. And there was like 5 schools in the area where you could go. So everybody picked the one that was closest to them. So the one that I went to, we ran into somebody like your sister who had no idea what Excel was, barely knew how to turn on a computer. And so the teacher spent practically 3 hours of the training explaining what a spreadsheet was and what Excel was, and that it can add up numbers. And her whole attention was addressed to that person. The rest of us were fairly medium to high level users, and we wanted to be asking about formulas and how can we use it to work out student ages, and some of which I knew, and because I'm a high level, but that was what they'd been there for. But because we spent the whole 3 hours learning what a spreadsheet was, when we finished, the feedback was it was a waste of time for us.
Yep.
The person who had practically one-on-one training was absolutely ecstatic with it, but there was 15 of us in the class. So 1 to 15, 1 to 14, she won, we lost. Got back to my school and was talking to other people. they had the exact opposite reaction. They went there for basic learning, but because there was a high level person who grabbed all the attention, the teacher spent the entire time talking about formulas and everything else like that, whereas they wanted to learn. The school had the education department had wasted 3 hours worth of training for about, I don't know, 100 people, because nobody had thought, are you a basic learner? Are you an intermediate learner? Or are you a high level learner? And then sent you to that school. And if you thought you were an advanced and you got there and you found out you were a medium, at least you were close enough to the top level that you would have been able to do it. They never ever picked up on that. Now, this is from the Department of Education that should know about training people.
They should know something about education. Yes, you would think.
One would think. But they never ever did that. And I worked about 2 years in the school system, and we had these days, and the same thing. The next time it was Word, again, there was no are you basic. It was just which is the closest school and you can go to that one. And there was no way to even find out if, okay, Bob and Rona and Tanya are going to that one. We should all be fairly high level, so let's go to the same school. You couldn't even do that to find out, because you didn't know who was nominating, and trying to get a hold of everybody during school holidays was impossible. But anyway, it was one of the things that really taught me about you have to provide a medium type level and then give additional resources. Oh, okay, so Bob, you don't really know what a spreadsheet is. Okay, the basics are it does this, this, and this. Okay, so follow along as best you can, and as we're doing things, if you get stuck, either ask the person who's sitting next to you, do you mind, Tanya, if you help Bob? No, that's fine. Or we'll just quickly go through it so that you can at least keep up. And that's what I consider a bad trainer, somebody who just caters to the one person in the group, because it makes them look really good. I've shown her all of that, and they're totally ignoring everybody else. And that's on a face-to-face level. But even in your online training, if you're not showing how to meet the medium levels, you're wasting people's time.
Yeah, no, I agree. You try to train to everybody that would be in your group. When you start doing it online, e-learning type thing, you don't know what the level of expertise is of what you are training, or to the people that you're training to, because they could be anywhere from, this is their first day that they've got an iPad and they're using it to look at something on the web, to the high level guy that's got 15 servers in his back room and is mining Bitcoin and running his own power plant and running servers and doing all this fancy coding and so forth. Because coding's a whole separate thing. You don't know which one you're talking to. Now, that high level person, you might be able to show them everything that they would need to know in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. But that person who doesn't get on at all, well, you've got to say there's some prerequisites that you have to have, like you've got to be able to know how to use a computer, very basic things. But at the beginning level, if they've never opened the program, they need to know how to go through that. So you have to bring some people up. And in my training that I'm doing right now, is, I'm going through, okay, here's the program. Here's how here's how you get it. Here's how you license it. Here's how you install it. All right. So if people don't need that, they can skip over those lessons and go right to the point that, they need to go to, right? They can kind of jump around. I've tried to design it so that there's some flow, but when you're dealing with very technical training, the flow sometimes isn't clear because you can jump around. If you're using some particular piece of software, you may not want to jump into something that's very far down the line that you need to have all the other stuff, right? Because I don't want to name any software programs at all, because it applies to all of them. So It depends how you want to build that up. So I'm trying to do it that way, and it can get difficult at times. Now, I do know that once I do get it released and I start getting comments back, I will be shooting more videos, more screencasts, more training on how to do those particular subjects as fill-ins, to put stuff in. And then I'm doing one at the end, which is like, here's what I do.
Yeah.
Here's how I go about doing it. And that's because some of the things that I do, other people don't. Right? I found this to be the most efficient way for me, at least, to be able to go do these particular things. You can follow my lead. If not, we've talked about other ways, and you can figure out your own that may go. Because sometimes there's more than one way to skin that cat. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody who has cats. I have cats. My cat, I don't know where my cat is, right? My cat is always, usually when I'm on the internet, she's on one of these lives or something, she's usually crawling all over me. But it is middle of the day, so she's probably doing her nap. All right. So, I've got my cat. So, but there's got to be different ways that you can do this. Right.
Well, we were talking about that at the very beginning, where it was use Google Sheets, but you could use Excel, or you could use Open Office, or you could use other types of programs. They all get the same end result. And exactly, you said there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I love how you have that how-to at the end, where this is how I do it. Because sometimes watching somebody else doing it their way, you still are going to do it your way, but you'll pick up an idea that you can then apply to your way, because you just didn't know that little bit could be done. So I don't want to use the programs you're using. I don't want to use the software that you're using, but you put this thing in and my program will allow me to do that as well. So I'm going to keep doing that from now on. And I think that's one of the best things about a trainer, watching a trainer doing it their way. If your students are able to pick up on that and do it without having to take you away from, but can I do this in Excel? Well, I'm showing you how to do it in Open Office. Yeah, but can I do it in Excel? Well,
yeah, and it's like, no, you can't do it in Excel. You have to use Open Office, because that's what I'm teaching. Well, what I'm teaching is I'm showing you how to do this in Open Office, because that's the free version. But you can do this in, Excel. Good example. I was helping somebody out last week do some stuff, and I'm doing it in Microsoft Word, right? And we're rebranding this stuff.
Yep.
And to get it to work the way this person wanted it, he wanted it done, was not the normal. So we figured out a way to do that. Well, it turns out that the function in Word doesn't exist in Google Pages.
No,
it's not there. It's not there, right? So I'm doing the Google searches saying, how do you do this in Google Pages? And every place I look, it doesn't support that. So sometimes you just have to go to another thing. And then on top of that, he was using the Apple equivalent of Word, right? He didn't have Microsoft Word on there, right? And trying to find out that, and then what version he had and so forth, right? We eventually had to call Apple and say, how do you do this with that program with what version he had? So it looks like we got it resolved and so forth. So there's a lot of different variances that you have to go with, and you sometimes you just got to do the best you can. And
that's something that is off when with training. You sometimes have to settle.
Yeah.
You can't. We've got a bit of feedback there. I don't know if anybody else can hear it, but no, it looks like it's gone again. I use Google Docs to create most of my documents. As you know, I've got my Google Voice typing.
Right. Yep.
But I do most of my final editing in Word, because it has more functions. It's the difference between free versus paid, and it allows me to find and replace special characters. It allows me to do some fancy things that Google Docs takes it up to a certain point, but it doesn't have the next level up. So, however, if I didn't have Microsoft Office, I would settle with what I've got with Google Docs, or
Yeah,
I'd go
and
on.
you live with that. Yep.
Exactly. And you live with what you got. And as a trainer, you can say, yes, go and buy Microsoft Word, here's my link, or whatever it might be. But you can also be able to say to everybody, hey, it's okay if it doesn't have a fancy footer, or it doesn't allow you to, find and replace tabs throughout and put them in as I don't know, as an enter or something. It's being able to accept that because Bob has XYZ version of ABC doesn't mean that I can't take some of the techniques that he's teaching me in Camtasia, or some of the techniques that he's teaching me in Word, and apply it back to what I've currently got. And for a lot of people, they don't get that. And I've now started, because of the way that I run my business and the way I run my training, I always look for the simple solutions. I look for the free solutions. I look for the easy ways, but I still spend money when I have to. And trying to make people understand that, I find, is one of the biggest issues as a trainer. Have you run into that as well?
Yeah, you run into that. I run into it with my customers. I have one customer. I mean, he is not at all shy to spend, a couple $1,000s for this, right? It's like, okay, fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No problem. Whatever. But then he wants to do this one other thing, and he doesn't want to spend zero. I mean, it's like, it's not like it's a money issue, but he's like, I don't want to do it. He wanted to edit this one. He had two pictures that he wanted to edit. He will not ever purchase Adobe Photoshop, no matter what, because they charge a monthly fee, and he doesn't want to pay a monthly fee. So we were looking for other appropriate software, because all he wanted to do was to crop it.
Yep.
Okay, fine. I mean, there's like a lot of free things, but he wouldn't do it on the web either. So he wouldn't do it out there. So, I mean, and he's running Windows 10, and I'm going, okay, let's see. I use Photoshop, okay, to do that cropping. What else can I use? So I had to go find programs. Finally found that there's this stupid thing in Windows 10, 3D editor or something. I didn't know it existed. I mean, because I would never use it, because if I need to do something, I got Photoshop.
Yeah.
And found out that it would do exactly what he wanted. But then, of course, I billed him for, 2 hours of my time, which he had no problem with paying. And I'm not cheap. Right? No. And he doesn't have a problem with that. He's like, oh, no, your time, no problem. Right. Yeah. But am I going to spend $7.95 on this here? No, I won't do it. I refuse to do it. It's his quirk. Okay. He's very successful, makes a lot of money, runs this business. It's an accounting firm, a very specialized accounting firm. Mm-hmm. They only do expatriates, basically U.S. citizens that work for U.S. companies but live outside of the U.S.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So he has a lot of very big names, right? Yeah. That actually, I know a lot of those names, but I can't say because I'm not allowed to, but you would recognize the names. Yeah. So it's like, oh, okay. All right. But he takes care. They're not movie stars or anything. They're business people. But so, he knows how to deal with those people and so forth, but he's got a couple of just really strange quirks that he just won't do this. So going through and having to go through and get these people to recognize that there may be other things, and to do what you need to do, you may want to purchase it. We were talking Camtasia. I know people that don't use Camtasia, and they use, what is it, Screencast? Something like that. There's one for the something. They use that. Oh, and that's the best thing in the world. I don't know why you would ever bother using Camtasia. Well, it depends what you want to do. If you want to use Screencast, that's fine. You want to use one of the other programs that are out there. You want to use Premiere. Premiere is fantastic. It's just very, very technical and can be complex to do. Camtasia is kind of a tie between the two, and it does everything that you want to do. So it's like, okay, and it's not that expensive. But if you're only going to use it for a one-time shot, then it's probably not something that you'll want to get into. But I use it, I can't say daily, but 2-3 times a week. Every time I do a webinar, I edit that webinar with it, and then put it together and then put it up. Yep. Right. And I've automated some of those tasks within Camtasia as well.
Right.
After I did it for the 5th time, having to get this image, this music, adjust here. And I went oh, come on, I'm going to stop. And I automated it and made it so that I have everything in a group. And all I got to do is to drag it down. And in this case, I have to ungroup, edit the slide screen that's up there. All right. Boom, boom, boom. Make sure I spelled everything right, which in my case usually does not come out right anyway. All right. And then I'm done with that. Do the one on the end for the outgo. Same thing. Drag it down. I finally spent the time, and it took me about a half hour to really get it right so that the length of the music was there. It came in at the right spot, had the right image, the logo, the credits, all this other stuff. So all I had to do was to drag it in and drop it, and I'm done. And then it's click the button to render it out. And then that just takes time. Actually, I don't even do it on this machine anymore. I move it to another machine that sits over in the corner that I can just start it up on that one and render it, and it's not going to interfere with my day-to-day work. So I try to use as much automation as I can, not as much as you probably use. Some of it I have, and I'm glad I didn't in this particular case, because the project kind of just fell off and is going to die here very soon. So I saved us some money, but it turned out that what I needed to do was to get information out of this program and into a spreadsheet. And instead of me doing my, Control C, Control V, cutting and pasting, I said, hey, can I get it from something? Zapier would do it. If then else didn't do it, because there wasn't a hook into it. So, but to do it, I needed to subscribe to the, $20 to $50 a month plan. And I said, well, I'll wait a little bit and see what happens. Well, it's a good thing I waited, because I just saved myself that money, because that thing just fell off the end of the earth, and I'm no longer, you probably got it over there now, because aren't you on the end of the earth over there? Right. From my point of view, okay, I still think it's flat, so you must be on the other side, all right. And that's a whole long involved story about the flat earth, and how I spent years convincing 7-year-old up to 11 that the earth was flat. Right. And his younger brother just kept looking at me and shaking his head, and the older brother would just argue with me. It's a fun story, actually, but neither here, for another day.
We'll save it up for another time.
Yeah.
But and what you just said then is the whole idea behind business automation. It's better to spend half an hour to get it right, so that every other time you just drag it in. And as you said, you just make a single change. You're not having to, I've got to put in this, 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 I've got to put in this. Now I finished it. Now I've got to wait for a round. And then the next time I've got to put in this, I've got to put in this, I've got to put in. Now you just drag in the one thing, one or two changes, and then it goes. And the half an hour or whatever, how much time does it now take you to put that on?
It takes me about 15 seconds.
And how long did it used to take you?
It used to take me about 5 minutes every time I did it. That was provided I could find it again, because I kept saying, where the hell was that thing? Where's that music track? Where did I find? So I'd have to find it every time. So once I said, okay, that's it. I've got to stop, and I've got to make this and put it all together so I have it, naming it correctly, putting it in the spot that says Bob's Lessons, right? So all I had to do was to pop that open, grab it, drag, done. So however long it takes me to do that is how long it takes me to do it now. It's about 15 seconds.
Exactly.
Right. And there's a couple of other tasks that I do within Camtasia as well, that there isn't a real automated way to do it. But if you do it in the right sequence, I now can do it in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
All right. To play with it and muck with some audio. All right. Something that I do with everything I do. And if I go through and do it, it takes me about 30 seconds. And if I don't do it in the right order, all of a sudden that 30 seconds could become 2 hours, because you're just not paying attention to when you do it. Learned that the hard way. So.
And that's where most lessons and automations come from. It was the hard way, and then you found the easy way. And once you start doing that, you are able to be more productive. You're not spending that 2 hours or that 5 minutes or that 30 minutes or whatever. You invest the 30 minutes so that it now costs you 15 seconds. And how many videos are you using it on? How many times during a year would you be doing that 15-second task? And addressing that and realizing that makes you realize that the 30 minutes investment to create it originally is well and truly worth it.
Well, I'm lazy, so I really, if I can cut down that amount of time, I can go do something else, whatever that something else may be. It may be that I just got this one finished. That's great. Now that one's done. Don't have to worry about it anymore. And I also, you were alluding to this earlier, when you do a lot of your training videos, you're not trying to make them polished Hollywood productions with a written script that you have practiced, memorized, and making sure that you get the right enunciation done, the right tone. Oh, wait a minute, I better redo that. My head's a little too far to this side. If I have it up here, it looks a little better. Oh, my cap needs to be down. Oh, I have a glare on my glass. We're not producing those type of things. We're trying to produce informational stuff so that they can do their job better. I have a lot of so's. You and I talked about that one time months back. And I do a lot of rights. Well, depends upon what I'm doing with the video. I may actually go in and work on fixing the audio for that. A lot of times I just let it go. And the only thing I do spend a little bit of time on in my webinars is I do go in and clean out the dead air. If you're on a webinar, and right now, Eric's on the webinar, Rana's on the webinar, or on this live, and I ask Rana a question, or I ask a general question, like, what is the weather like where you're at? So at that point, I can basically lean back in my chair, put my feet up, get a cup of coffee before the answer comes in. Mm-hmm. So there's always this dead, you could have this dead air because you're waiting for the answer to come in because of the delay. And we know that there are delays here. They can be 5 seconds. They can be up to 20 seconds. So I will usually go in and cut that dead air out of the video to help shorten it. And in a 2-hour webinar that I do, in most cases, once I cut those out, it'll probably take out 10 minutes of dead air.
Which is worthwhile.
It could be, 2 seconds here, 4 seconds there, 20 seconds here. They start adding up over time.
And whichever video editing software you're using, it's really easy to see because it's just a line and you can go there and cut. It's not like you're having to actually even listen to it. The main is to see, is it showing you doing something that you don't want to delete out? Because that's the time where you're saying go to the left, not to the right. If you delete that out, because
and you can, after a while, if you're doing your own editing of yourself, you can see in the audio patterns, you can actually visualize some of them. because I can see when I cough, like I just did a couple of minutes ago. Oh, excuse me, right? Because I didn't get over to turn down my audio or hit what they call the cough button, right? Mm-hmm. And you press that kills the mic, allows you to cough, clear your throat, and then you can turn it back on. That's what they have on radio. Right? Mm-hmm. Any type of radio, they have a cough button, so they can turn the mics off and then clear their throat or whatever, turn it back on. In television, they don't really do that, but most of it is on tape. Oh, God, that shows how old I am. It's on tape. Is it Memorex or is it live? So they're doing that kind of stuff. They basically just pause and then continue on. They do a cut, right, and can take that stuff out or maybe fill it with B-roll or something to not worry so much about the video. So there's a whole bunch of different things you can do with that. But after a while, sometimes I leave them in there because I don't want it so polished that it doesn't look like I'm doing this real.
Exactly. And
I could get a transcript of most of my training and I could go hire Agnes to do voiceover. I could. It would be an awful lot of work, but then it would not have any of the ums and the right. I mean, I hope you guys are all understanding that, blah, blah, blah. And you have to remember, if you're doing the recording, the questions that you ask, you're not going to get answers to. Right? You can't be asking open-ended questions or did you do this now? Did you do that? So you've got to be a little bit, working with it.
But that's awful when you're somebody who's but more be back again. Hopefully it'll stop.
Yeah, it stopped. You kind of went to stutter mode.
When you're putting out a lot of content and you don't have a team, if you're spending all of your time trying to edit something that for most people they're willing to forgive, then again you're losing your productivity. If it's taking that long, and I'm the same as you. When I first started doing this, I knew the symbol on the video that was when I said so, and when I went I got to recognize that, and I was starting to delete it all out. And then I watched the video, and it went from me talking like this to, and it was obviously had been cut, and it looked really, really fake and bad. And I made the decision that, if I don't want people to be able to see me stuttering, then I can't be live. And most of my videos are live, so you get to hear the ums and the so's and
exactly. It's natural conversation.
Exactly. And I think people want that more and more now. Even in the polished training, they want to see the mistakes you make. They don't want you to cut out the bits where you've gone, oh, this is the wrong screen. Oh, I shouldn't have gone here. Hang on, let me go to the right screen. In the past, you would have deleted that out. Now, half the time I leave it in there, because if I'm going to the wrong screen, then the person who's watching it has probably gone to the wrong screen.
Yep.
So learn that, you're not the only person in the world who makes mistakes.
Yeah, everyone's going to make them, and they're going to make those mistakes, and they're going to be going to the wrong thing. They're going to show the wrong screen. Makes no difference whatsoever, as long as you impart the information and you try to keep it in some type of logical order. All right, it's when, as far as a lot of instructors, they won't present it in a logical fashion. They'll be jumping here or there and presenting information and then changing to some other type of information, then coming back. So you want to try to at least create a flow or a chart for, I think we're up on our time.
Yes.
Keeping a little flow of what you want to do, a little cheat sheet that says we're going to do this, 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 and this, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to produce that as a document and give it to everybody, but you want to know what the flow is going to be and how you put all the pieces together.
And I think that's a great spot to finish on, but it really is, if you're jumping around, you're confusing the people who are watching. When it flows through, you feel confident. you not only feel confident, but the person who's being trained feels confident because they know from A to B to C to D to Z that they're actually going to get the result that they wanted. Okay, then. So thank you so very much, Bob. I have always get a great deal of pleasure out of listening to you and learning all the things that you know, and you just keep dropping little tidbits of how to do things throughout it. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this last hour and a bit with you. For everybody who's interested, Bob's membership site and his website is in the comments above this video. And if you've got any questions about anything that Bob's been talking about, please ask. He's a member of the group and he can see your questions. If needs be, I'll tag him or he'll come and check if there's any comments. If you want to know anything about Camtasia, Bob is the person to go to, but he is so knowledgeable about so many other things. He is incredibly helpful and always very giving of his time, too giving in some cases, but I'm the same. So similar people, similar ideas, and we want you to succeed. So please ask Bob if he's got any questions. Bob, anything you'd like to finish with?
No, it's just if you've got something that you want to do, just go do it. If you want to train on something, just put the training together. It can be useful. Also, if it's something you don't know how to do, try training somebody else and you'll learn it so friggin' fast because now you've got to show them, I could do the, how to change a tire on a 32 Packard, whatever the heck a 32 Packard is. All right. I have no idea. I've never seen a 32 Packard except in pictures. But if there was one in my driveway, I'd go out. I'd have to be able to show somebody else how to do it. Well, I'm going to figure out how to do it. And once you figure it out, you can do it. If you don't know how to do it, try to train somebody else and show them how to do it. That's the best advice that I could give.
I love that. That's a great way to finish. So thank you, everybody who's been a part of this. Thank you, Rona and Eric, for joining in. For everybody watching the replay, please say something in the comments to thank Bob for having come into Business Automation 101 and given us his time. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye, everybody.